What's going on, everybody? John Arapoli here today, being joined by Chris Rini, who is the author of Fine Art of Violence, Volume 3, just recently released here. So, Chris, thanks for being here, man. I know we were talking a little bit off air here. It's a really great book. I hope everybody gets a chance to go ahead and look through it. I know you did a lot of work for it. There's a few other artists as well. But before we actually get into everything, I just want to congratulate you on releasing this here because it is a fantastic idea and a lot of great work in this.
Oh man, John, thank you for having me on. And thanks a lot. This has been a real thrill to put this whole series together. And I am excited that enough people have been purchasing the books that I've been able to make three, and volume four is cranking along as well. Yeah.
So let's start talking about this whole entire process, right? Because this is volume 3, right? You said volume 4 is on the way. Kind of how did you brainstorm this idea and kind of get the ball turning to be able to keep pumping all these out and releasing what's been a very solid product?
Well, I really enjoy kind of watching. We all have like our favorite fighters, people that we're excited to watch, and I used to do a bit of like commission work, where you're like, somebody calls you up and they're like, hey, will you, draw, paint, or whatever, my favorite fighter punching someone in the face. I did a lot of that, but it's really ultimately it's not terribly satisfying for me um, as an end goal. I kind of like the kind of grand scheme of MMA as a huge landscape, and I realized at one point like I just like hanging out, watching the fights, kind of drawing them as they happen, and then just kind of seeing like what kind of magical things happen. All these wild things turn out. If you watch enough fights, you'll see enough like crazy stuff. And I realized that no one's gonna, no, especially like I wanted to work for a website that would want to hire me to kind of chronicle this stuff in an artistic way. And I kind of realized that it's probably not going to happen. I was going to have to do it myself.
And then just like that, the books were born, and now we're on volume 3, volume 4 coming up here soon. I do want to ask you
Yeah.
just along the lines of the 3 different volumes that have been released. I'm sure there are some similarities. Are there any differences? Just talk about some of the similarities and differences between the 3 volumes released so far.
Sure. Well, in the beginning, I did all the artwork myself, and Josh Rosenblatt did all of the essays. Josh was my editor when I worked at Vice, and he kind of helped turn my artwork into a column and like the kind of ideas that I had behind my work um, into an idea, like a fully formed idea. Like I like to reference art history. I always joke with people that I'm secretly educating mainstream people about mixed martial arts, and I am secretly educating mixed martial arts fans about fine art. So Josh's essays in the first book, like I forced him to like do a lot of research about classical Greek sculpture and 1950s Warner Brothers animations and things like that are behind my work. And then for volume two, I looked for writers whose work I had followed closely and kind of felt like, oh, I would love to approach this person and give them the free reign. And, a lot of writers, I'm sure you know this, like the MMA feels like a hamster wheel sometimes. And it's like, what if you got to write whatever you want? What if you got to talk about things the way you want to talk about them? And it was just important to me to work with people I admired. And
So let's
then,
talk about some of the specific stuffs here in this volume, and we'll start with
sure.
just right. So there's, I believe, 52 pages, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head. Each page, there's so many different artworks. It goes all the way from atom weight right through to heavyweight. So you can imagine that how much just different artwork there is that's in all of these. When you're putting these products out, right? How long does each single drawing or sketch take you to do? Because it seems like obviously this is, I would imagine I could barely draw a stick figure. I imagine like just one of these pieces takes a lot of time with delicacy and everything else that goes into producing this very fine art.
Well, I went to art school for college, and I took tons of what's called life drawing. here in Europe they call it croquis. In America they call it life drawing. And imagine, it's a bunch of people in a room and one naked person in the center, and they just pose and you draw them. And you know, it, in my mind, especially when I was younger, it was like, oh, they pose and you spend hours drawing them, perfectly rendering them. And what I found though was that some of these really interesting teachers I had would be like, okay, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and it was a great exercise in fitting the entire human composition on the page, and you had to really strip down like your line, and how can you fit a complex composition on a page in 30 seconds, and it's got to be scribbles, but you get the shapes in there. And I graduate, and 20 years later, 15 years later, I was in my 30s, kind of meandering through life, and I was going through some of my old drawings, and I saw these old life drawings, and I saw that the ones that were between 2 and 5 minutes long, they stood the test of time. They really looked good. There was some real, I don't know, staying power to them. So I applied that. They started using that. I would watch the fights live, and I would really try to, like, if anybody on your podcast follows me, I'm on Twitter at Rini MMA. And oftentimes I'll watch an entire fight card and I'll draw every fight while it's happening. And I apply that same limitation, that 2 to 5 minutes. Like, what can you do? How can you capture what just happened? And every once in a while, you really strike gold. It only takes one line to be perfect. And then I would scan them into the computer and turn them into digital paintings. For this particular book, there's, like, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80 digital paintings that are based on these live charcoal drawings.
So now, when you talk there and you're saying how a lot of these drawings, right, 2 to 5 minutes, and how a lot of, like, when you look at your old work, that they kind of stood the test of time, these quick ones. What is it? Is that a matter of, like, I know a lot of times, even like in the broadcast industry, for example, a lot of times if you overthink, a lot of times prepping for an interview or doing interviews, sometimes when you overthink, it seems like those are the ones that go, astray, and things go
Yes.
wrong, as to when you're more natural and in the moment and having a good time, and that type of stuff. So is that kind of similar to with the artwork, when you're not overthinking it, not overlooking it, that these things come out so great and easy?
That is 100% right. It's really a matter of trusting yourself. I find that sometimes when it's a major fight, like, and I feel like I owe it some sort of, feel obligated to make a great piece of work. It is just, I might as well throw it in the trash before I even touch the pen to paper. Do you know who it's one of the hardest fights I've had to do? And I'm doing it yet again, is watching Volkanovski fight. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I feel like this guy is so special. He is just such a generational figure. And I've done so few images of him that I really am happy with. Yeah. I just started yesterday a new series of him and Max, the third fight. So I'm giving in. I won't give up. But yeah, yeah, totally. Putting too much pressure on yourself, too much prep, too much, psychological weight on something. It's like, just do it. Just be free.
So we had mentioned before, right? So this goes from atom weight right through heavyweight. So obviously a lot of different artwork. There's black and white sketches. There's colored sketches in it. When you're going through and you're putting this book together, how exactly do you determine what exact photos or sketches or anything like that is going to be placed inside of the book?
Well, kind of I want to keep growing as an artist, and I only in 2020 started doing digital artwork. And so this most current volume has the most digital work I've ever done. Like I said, about, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80 digital paintings that are based on original charcoal sketches. Maybe one or two of them are pure digital from scratch. I think the Alexander Pantoja versus Brandon Royval is that one happens to be purely digital. No traditional work at all for that. But it is. I'm kind of. I don't know. I always think that I'm gonna have a method, like, oh, championship fights will be traditional ink. prospects will be in charcoal, and then contenders and elite stuff that'll be digital. And I hate to say it never works out that way. It just never does. I wish there was a method, but it's mostly just madness.
So I do want to talk now about some pieces that stood out, maybe to both of us here. We'll start with me because obviously I'm sure you have a lot of ones that are personally great for you that we'll get into. But I'll start with my three that I really liked that stood out to me, and maybe you can talk about some of these a little bit. So the three that I really liked, there was the one moment which was a great moment for all MMA fans, was when Connor was kind of sitting there with his broken leg and Joe Rogan squatting down and trying to interview him. And then you had Dustin Poirier's wife going through in the cage there. I really liked that drawing. There was Giga and Cub Swanson. You kind of did them like with a chicken and a bear, like a little tiny cub inside the cage. I thought that was like this unique look to artwork with, especially with Cub Swanson too, just like a little tiny bear there. And the other one I really liked, it was more almost like a kind of like a superhero comic vibe to it, and it was with Mackenzie Dern and Nina Nunez. Those three, when I went through, like really stood out and caught my eye. I don't know if you could just talk about those a little bit and kind of how you kind of got maybe inspired to make those drawings the way how you did.
Oh, sure. Those are three great choices. Oh, I really like them. So let's see. First off, the Connor and Dustin one. Uh, Oftentimes, the core idea behind what I do for these fights is, can I distill the dynamic of a fight down to a single image? That's like, can you understand something about that fight? And I realized that, like, the most enduring part of that McGregor Poirier fight was when other people were in the cage instead of the two of them. It's almost like the two of them was like the spark, but the real craziness happened after everybody else came in. His wife gave him the finger. He's pointing at them and screaming, and Joe is just like, "I'm gonna get in here and just do my thing." Yes, I just thought it was insane, and I thought that I it reminded me of those like Renaissance paintings where there's like 10 people, one's pointing at another, the other's like gesticulating wildly, of like feeling like horror and sadness and joy and all these different things. It really, it was a crazy moment like that. But I just stripped it down to the four people who I wanted you to really focus on and be like, wow, this is insane. And then let's see. Oh, yeah, yeah. So this is more of a pun than anything else, but Giga Chikadze, I look at it and I'm like, oh, like the Giga Chickadee, like it's all I see when I always draw him as like a little chicken. And then, Cub Swanson, that is actually a live fight night drawing. That was like probably done in, 2 to 5 minutes, like just one of those things where I'm like, this is who I see. This is all it is. It's like you get to make these dad jokes. And then, oh, yeah, I love that. I actually really enjoy drawing Mackenzie Dern. I feel like she creates so many wild and cool grappling scenes. And I love how methodical she was taking apart Nina Nunez. And that's actually one of my favorite paintings in the book. And I did layer what's called Ben-Day dots, which is similar to those old comic book newspaper style dots for the background. And yes, I love that. I love using those like older techniques layered on with newer digital technologies. I really love mixing old world and new world images.
So you mentioned that the Mackenzie Dern one is one of your favorite ones in it. Do you have any other ones that are favorites of yours that maybe stick out a little bit more to you personally that you have in this book here that you want to talk about?
Oh, believe it or not, I have never been a terribly good portrait artist. And I was doing these Twitch streams and ended up having some computer problems. I got really frustrated, so I just turned my camera down at a sketchbook, and I was like, "Oh, screw this! I'm just gonna do a portrait of Jan Blachowicz," And I banged it out, and I was like, "God damn, that is good," So and it really kind of like What we were saying earlier, where you're like living in the moment and not overthinking things. It was because I was so distracted by being frustrated with technological issues. I really didn't overthink this portrait. It came out great. And it kind of set off like a domino effect where the next book will have a new emphasis on portraiture because I'm like, I can do this. I can make this happen. We're going to make this happen. So the Jan Blachowicz portrait in the book is really quite special to me because it represents like when you overcome your own personal uh, blockages or insecurities. Yeah.
And then another thing too with this book that I want to ask you about before we start wrapping things up here,
Sure.
there are like little articles that kind of go along with each different weight class. There's a number of different writers that were associated
Mm-hmm.
with this volume 3 here. What was it like
Sure.
working with them and just like about their work as well too to help spice the book up a little bit?
Oh man, I don't want this book to be just a personal showcase. I would love it if I could be like kind of like the hub of a wheel where all the different spokes can shine. And I consume MMA journalism and podcasts and all sorts of media, like a kind of voraciously. And some people really do. It's really special when somebody makes their mark, when they're able to showcase their stand out in a way. And I think something like Sean Sheehan has become like an authority on MMA scoring. And I pitched it to him. I was like, oh man, look at this. It was Ketlin Vieira and Yana Kunitskaya. And it's not like, the greatest fight in the world, but it was fascinating in that one person had like tons of control time and the other one had very short bursts of like intense damage. And I felt like, wow, the judges got it right, like, and I really like the artwork for that one. So I said to him, like, would you like to write about scoring and use this fight as an example? He was into that. Josh Rosenblatt, he comes back every year. I got to write about, I have a personal affinity for the Rory McDonald story because I feel like people put too much pressure on that kid. His career was not doomed from the start, but like, could you ever live up to being GSP's heir to the throne? And I love working with Julie Kedzie. She's really passionate about fighting, and she's a great writer. Now I don't know if you know, she's like an adjunct college professor. She got her master's in writing now, and I always thought that it's important to. I've heard fighters say that, oh, journalists don't really have a right to speak on this, that only fighters should have a right. So I love working with her and feeling like, all right, I'm going to meet fighters halfway. Like a fighter's going to talk about fighting now, so that's really cool. And, Junie Ba, he has nothing to do with MMA at all. I just happen to be a fan of his, but he writes a lot of writes and illustrates a lot of Afrocentric storytelling. And I thought, wow, we have a couple African champs. That would be really cool if it was somebody who's more connected to them doing their portraits instead of Marco Bucci, an Italian guy living in Canada. And Marco is just a stunning teacher and a huge fan of MMA. I actually follow some of his tutorials when I was getting started with digital painting. So it was really cool to feel like I admire his work, but we also and look to him for advice on how to execute things technically. But then I get to also hire him to work together side by side.
And then finally, just to close things up here, your work too, right? It's more than just doing these books. I know you are associated with some websites, right? Bloody Elbow. You've done a lot of work for different outlets as well. So just talk a little bit about that, kind of how you kind of got yourself started and that whole entire journey and process as well.
Sure. Well, I got my first job working for Vice because of a Reddit post. And that was okay. I mean, the best part was that it hooked me up with Josh, and now we've kind of worked together on and off for 10 years. And uh, I had to take a break because I actually burnt out my arm doing some wood engraving. And I had to take a break from making artwork. And then I had a couple kids. And then when I wanted to get back into art, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna tell my opinion, and I'm not gonna make it about artwork. So I started doing these cartoons, and that's why Kid Nate from Bloody Elbow contacted me. He's like, I want to publish these. and we kind of turned it into a regular column. And I've been doing that, MMA Squared at bloodyelbow.com. I think since 2018. Jesus, yeah, I've been doing that for 4 years now, or 5 years, something like that. That's been a great experience. And then I sell my books through chrisrini.com, and you can get like a physical one or a digital copy over there. And yeah, I think that's all I got going on. Thank God that's all I got going on right now. But oh, here's one last really neat thing. I'm gonna have a gallery show of my work here in Copenhagen in the fall. So maybe I'll let you guys know about that. I'll give you a little preview of that maybe in the end of September.
Awesome, man. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Now, finally, last thing here. I know you pretty much did this throughout the interview, but one last time for everybody, go ahead, plug your social media because I know obviously you have a great Twitter following, and you mentioned how you kind of get those moments out during fight nights and whatnot. So tell everybody where to follow you out on social media. Remind everybody about the website. Anything else you got to plug before you get going? You get the last word. Floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And by the way, dude, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no
This was
problem at all, man.
excellent. Let's see. My books are available at chrisrini.com. Also, future books, you can finance them on a monthly basis through Patreon, patreon.com/chrisrini. There's also a link to Patreon at my website. I'm on Twitter every single day at Rini MMA. I am on Instagram, Chris_Rini. And then you can catch MMA Squared, my editorial MMA cartoon series at bloodyelbow.com every Monday and Wednesday. And John, man, thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure.